Hello, welcome back to the Learn Fusion for FTC tutorial series. In this video, we'll be going into a little more sketching, using the rest of the tools in that Create menu, and applying some more constraints to our sketch. Let's hop into Fusion. Alright, as usual, I'm going to start by just saving this file. We'll call it video 3, save it in Fusion Tutorials. Alright, now let's make our first sketch. I'll make it on the top face right here, and I'll start by just making a quick rectangle. Hit R, that's the hotkey there, and I'll make this a 40mm or 40mm rectangle, just like that. Cool. Something I often want to do is place a shape perfectly in the center or concentric to another one. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to use something called a construction line. You can make a construction line out of any shape in a sketch, but you can do it actually before you make that shape or afterwards. First, I'll show you how to do it while you're making it. I'm going to press L to start the line tool. Then, over here in the Sketch Palette menu, you'll see this option, Line Type. So if I press this option, Construction, highlights like that. I can also hit X to toggle this option on and off. So I'm going to toggle it on. Then, I'm going to draw a line from one corner to the other corner of this rectangle. Or, I guess it's a square now. Cool. I press Escape to leave that menu. Now I'm going to press C to create a circle. Since I had construction on before, it's still enabled on this line, but I don't want this one to be construction, so I'm going to hit X once to disable that. Now in Fusion, it'll actually snap straight to the center of that line. And if you see that little triangle next to my cursor, that means that I'm snapped to the center. That's a constraint, which you can manually set later, or you can do it while you're making it. So if I go here, see the triangle, and click, I know that the center of my circle is now in the center of that line, which means it's concentric to my square. Let's make this circle have a radius of 25mm, or diameter. Alright, now I have a fully constrained sketch. Everything is black, and one thing you'll notice sometimes is that even construction lines can be undefined. So my construction line is this gray color. That means it's fully defined. If a construction line is blue, just like regular lines, that means they're also undefined. I'm going to go ahead and finish this sketch. As you can see, got a nice little square and circle there. So, now with this, I'm actually going to go ahead and create my first 3D shape. We'll go into creating more 3D shapes in another video, but I'd like to do this to show you guys how to make a sketch on a face. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here, this area of my sketch, and this is the extrude function up here. That allows me to take a 2D shape and simply drag it straight out to form a 3D one. You can either drag it out to a distance, you can see the readout here, or you can just type in a number. Let's make a nice cube, so I'm going to go 40mm out. Alright, now I've got this cube. And Fusion automatically goes ahead and hides that sketch for me. But sometimes you do want to extrude again for the same sketch, so you just re-show it afterwards. Okay, now I'm going to make my second sketch. Instead of making this on one of the cardinal planes, I'm actually going to make it on the face of an object. What that does is derives that geometry data into my sketch, which can be super useful if you're making complex shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and make this sketch on the top face of my object right here. So I'm going to click there. As you can see in my sketch, I don't have dimensions for these things, but this circle from the top of my object and all the sides of the square are already in here. And I can base my geometry data in this sketch around those features. So now I'm going to go ahead and let's make a spline. Splines are pretty cool, especially if you're looking to make organic shapes. They are a little trickier to fully define, but it's okay. We'll work through it. I'm just going to go ahead and make a nice little curve going from this corner. I'm going to go ahead and go up to somewhere up here, and then I'm going to loop back around and connect to that corner. As you can see, the spline tool, just like the line tool, automatically goes ahead and tries to create another point, but I'm all done with it. So I'm going to click this check mark, and I'm done. Okay, problem. My spline is blue, which means it's undefined. As you can see, splines have all sorts of freedom. So this line is completely floating away, and I have no clue what I'm going to do with it. So what I can do here is I can drag it up and down to my free will, just kind of floating it around. That's useful if you're looking to make something artistic, but I might also be looking to do something a little more defined, something measured. So I'm going to go ahead and create another construction line. Press L to make that line, and then hit X to turn it into a construction. I'm going to start it in the middle of this square. I'm going to go up, let's say, 30mm. Cool. And now I'll press enter to confirm that. So this line is fully defined, that construction line right there. That's because I have it anchored at the midpoint of this horizontal line segment, and Fusion automatically figured out that I wanted it to be perpendicular, and I defined a distance. That means that there are no other possible solutions of this line that could be found in the drawing. Now I'm going to go ahead and anchor this top point to the tip of that line. The way I'm going to do that is using a manual constraint. So as you can see, Fusion's created a lot of constraints for me as I'm sketching, but sometimes you want to add an additional constraint to make sure that things like splines, or sometimes even concentric circles, are well defined. So I'm going to use this one. It's coincident, which means 2 points overlapping. I'm going to click on this point, then on this one, and that's going to lock them together. Awesome. My spline is now black, which means it's fully defined, and I now have this new area inside. As you can see here, the construction line actually allows this to be one solid figure. So if I go ahead and click on this line, I can actually toggle it to unconstruction the line. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Press X. And now this is actually two separate areas. So construction lines are invisible to Fusion's area computation. So now I have one solid area. Cool. Let's finish that sketch. We won't make too many more solids here, but I do want to go through a couple more sketching tools. So let me make a new sketch on this plane, and I'm going to go ahead and hide all my old sketch and that body, just so we don't have too many things floating around here. First, let's go over the other types of rectangles. So we've already learned about the 2-point rectangle, which is that one that we get by default when you hit R. So that's the one you define 1 point, then you define the other corner. That's great. I'm going to undo that. But there is actually two other kinds of rectangles. The first one we'll talk about is the center rectangle. So you can select that over here in the sketch palette menu, or you can also go to create, rectangle, and then center rectangle. So the center rectangle is pretty much as it says in the name. You define this center point, then you define one of the corners, and it goes out from there. So this could be useful if you're looking to make concentric shapes, or if you're looking to base something around another object. So for this one, let's just say I want to make this a 70mm by 50mm rectangle. These are all arbitrary numbers, just ones that I think look nice. Now let's go over that last type of rectangle. That's going to be the 3-point. So for the 3-point rectangle, this gives you a lot of flexibility if you're looking to make a rectangle at a weird angle or in a weird location where you have anchors at odd places. So this one, same as the previous one, pretty much self-explanatory in the name. First, you draw a line segment, which can be either side of the rectangle, and you can actually define it while you're here. So I'm going to say that I want this side to be 60mm long, and then I'm going to anchor it to the horizontal line. Then you drag down or up to define the third point. That's the third point of the 3-point rectangle. We'll make this side 80mm. That seems like a nice number. All right. Now I have two rectangles, and these were not made with the 2-point rectangle tool. Awesome. I'll go ahead and finish that sketch. Let's make one more, just so I can show some more tools. All right. Now let's head down into this Create menu. There are a few more types of circles, but they're very similar to those rectangle tools, also pretty self-explanatory in the names. Next thing we'll touch on is the arcs. Arcs are a little different than splines in that they're closed shapes. So splines, you can keep adding more and more points, but the arcs, you get a set number of points. So 3-point arc is usually the most common one that you'll want to use. For this arc tool, you're just going to define the first point, the second point, and then you define a midpoint. So this midpoint will dictate the radius of your arc. And these arcs are always based on circles. So if I go there, now I've got this arc, but it is also completely undefined. The only thing that I've defined in this arc is the starting point of it. So let's go ahead and define it now, just so you can see how that looks. The first thing I'm going to do is place this second point. The way I'm going to do this is by making another construction line. So I'll hit L and then X. I'm going to mount that construction line from the origin, and then I'm going to go out. Let's say I want the two ends of my arc to be 50mm apart. So I'm going to hit that there. I'm going to go back and use that coincident tool. Click here, then click here. That locks those points together. Great. My arc is now locked in place, but the radius is still flexible. So let's say I wanted to make a semicircle kind of shape. That's actually really easy because you can once again just use that coincident tool, hit the center point here, then click on this line. That's pretty easy. The other way that we can do this, if I undo my work here, is we can actually just define the radius or the diameter of this circle. So I'm going to hit D for dimension. Then I'm going to click here to create a radius. Great. Let's say I want my arc to have a radius of 30 millimeters, and I'll hit enter to confirm that. So you'll see R30, which means radius of 30 millimeters. If you don't see that R, that means that it's using a diameter measurement. That's just for reference here. So we've now made one arc. Let's make a couple more. Other types of arcs are the center point arcs. So these ones, first you define one point, then you define the center point. Or sorry, you define the center point first, then you define the edge. Now you get to choose an angle. So this angle, let's say I want a 45-degree arc. Cool. And I actually don't want this to be construction, so I'm going to turn that off. Now I'll click to confirm that. But uh-oh, it's blue. So the problem is that I haven't defined this part. But because arcs are all circle-based, we can once again use the dimension tool and give this a radius. Let's be consistent and make all of our arcs have 30 millimeter radius. There we go. Just made a second arc using a completely different arc tool. Next, we'll move on to the polygons. Let me create one more sketch, probably not my last, just so I can show those on a fresh canvas. All right, the one that I tend to use the most is the inscribed polygon. So inscribed versus circumscribed, that's just inside a circle versus outside a circle. These are also circle-based. So I'll go ahead and start with an inscribed polygon. With these, you anchor the center point of the polygon first, then define the radius of the circle. So I'm going to click in this origin to lock that center down. Then I can start typing. Let's see. By default, it's a hexagon, but we can make it any number of sides we want. I'm going to make my hexagon have a 25 millimeter radius. And I like hexagons a lot, so we're going to stick with 6 sides for now. I'll hit enter there. And the problem is we are still undefined, but we only have one thing that's wrong here. It's just that we haven't locked the orientation of this polygon. There's a super easy way to do this, which I showed you guys in the previous video, and that's using the horizontal vertical tool. So let's say I want my flat sides to be on the top and bottom. So I'm going to get it to about right, but as you saw in the previous video, probably isn't quite right because my eye isn't as good as a computer. Then I'm going to click on one of the sides that I want to be flat, and then I'm going to hit the horizontal vertical. Now I'm fully defined. Great. Let's make some more polygons. So I'm going to go back to the create menu, go to polygon, and let's do a circumscribe this time. Those are cool too. I'm going to once again lock to the center. And for this one, let's go bigger. Let's go 35 millimeters. And for this polygon, let's make a 9-sided shape. Cool. I think that's a nonagon. Someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. So now I'm going to click to confirm, and I've got a second polygon. Same thing with the first one. I want to anchor some of my sides so that I have the shape fully defined. For this one, I think I'm actually going to make this side vertical. So I get it to about correct, click on that side, then hit horizontal vertical. So this time it was closer to vertical, so it locked it to vertical. Pretty cool. 2 polygons down. All right, we're on a roll here. I'm going to try to get through the rest of the sketch features in this video. One of the next ones that I use a lot is going to be the slot feature. I use center to center slot the most often, but center point slot can also be quite useful. We'll start with center to center. So if you're looking to either make a belt tensioner, or you're looking to add some adjustability into your design, or you're looking to just add a slot to reduce weight and cut out excess material out of your part, slots can be great. So for this slot, I'm actually going to start with a rectangle. So let's go ahead and throw out a 2-point rectangle right now. We'll just do 40 by 40. Then I'm going to go ahead and go back, grab that center to center slot tool. With this tool, let's see, I can add a slot from the center of one side to the center of the other side. So first, you define the two centers. The slot is also based on circles, so we'll define centers first. I'm going to go from the center of this side to the center of this side. Then you drag out to define the radius of your slot. For this slot, let's go with 20 millimeters. And now I hit enter. And my slot is already defined because I used those predefined tools. I'll just list them out here real quick, just so you have a reference. Both of these points are anchored to the center of the sides. And in addition, this second side was made a perpendicular to this side. Perpendicular and parallel trip me up sometimes. And then I have this radius, which is defined here. Awesome. The other slot tool, which I use often, is going to be the center slot. So I'm actually going to go and make a rectangle or another square right on top of this one. And I'll make the exact same shape, but I'm going to do it using the center slot. So to do that, instead of defining the two centers here, you define the point in the middle of your slot and then just one of these sides. So I first want to do the same thing that I did a little earlier and make that diagonal line. So I have a point that's in the center. Great. Now I'm going to go back, grab that center point slot tool. I'm going to turn off construction mode. So the first point I'm going to define is the center right there with the little triangle. Now I'm going to drag out and I'm going to go to here where you see that 90 degree and the center icon. Now if I drag out, you'll see that I can create the exact same shape. Similar as before, 20 millimeters, and press enter to confirm. For this shape, it's exactly the same, but you see a slightly different set of constraints on it. Instead of having this center point on this side, this center point is locked to this horizontal construction line, which I've built. This side is exactly the same as this one because it's attached to the center of this line segment, and it's perpendicular to this line segment. My radii are the same, so my slot is identical. All right, let's go ahead and finish that one too. One last tool which I'm going to show you guys in this video in terms of sketching is right down here. It's the point tool. The point tool is one of the most underutilized tools in Fusion, and it's actually something which I have pinned to my toolbar when my desktop is shrunk down to a smaller size. The point tool is super useful because it can give you reference points, and you can use it to create references using constraints. So I'll show you guys how I might use that. So I'm creating a 2-point rectangle right here. Let's say I want to make a 30 by 30 square here. And now I might want to make some shapes that go between the diagonals of two sides. So I'm going to go ahead and select the point tool. This follows all the same stuff as before. It can snap to middles, can do all those auto constraint things. So I'm going to put points in the middle of each of these sides. You just click once to place them, and they are fully defined. They're little black dots. You can see those center point icons on all of them. And to just combine some tools together here, I'm going to go ahead and use that 3-point rectangle to make some horizontals here. Pretty cool. So I got some more rectangles going on here. And that's how you might use points as references. The other thing you might want to use a point for is if you're combining multiple shapes together. I'll show you when I press Finish Sketch. Those points are still visible here. And they're clickable references. So let's say I wanted to measure the distance between two things. I could add a point at those two things, select them both, and then I can see down here in the bottom right the distance between the two. You'll see some more practical applications of that in the future, but this is just to give you an idea of how you can use these sketch features. All right, that'll be it for this video. In the next one, we'll go a little further into manual constraints, and then we'll get into 3D tools.